Welcome, everybody, to ADP Chasing. We have NFL Combine results to discuss. Anthony Richardson continues to skyrocket up draft boards. And again, Skyy Moore, for some reason, is rising for the third week in a row. Welcome to ADP Chasing.
Pat Fryer Helmo.
This is why I'm hot.
Anita Handjob.
Fix your site. Jamar. Alpha play chase. Are you kidding me? Kadarius Toney?
You can't handle the heat.
It looks like we're finally piss boys. You're right.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Davis, Pete, how are we doing?
Doing good.
To bring Anthony Richardson up into the sixth round.
That's right. That's our job here, right, Davis?
Literally why this show exists. This show, every year, we got to pick a rookie. And also, there's this thing going on in the fantasy space right now where Anthony Richardson is so beloved that you can't really have your brand associated by him by being like, yeah, I like him at ADP. Like there's a hyperbole contest in which everyone has to compete to be more breathless in their praise of Anthony Richardson. And look, I ranked him. I did my dynasty rankings this last week. I've got him pretty clearly as the 102 ahead of CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Wow. That's obviously a slightly different conversation than ADP chasing for this. But I think I actually, Sam and I were just talking before the show. I actually feel better about Anthony Richardson in that context. I'm still probably relative to consensus a little bearish on what he's going to do for fantasy this season.
All jokes aside about like the 6th round thing, and I don't think he could ever get up to where we were drafting Trey Lance last year just because people are so bought into the Niners and Shanahan and all those weapons. But I legit think there are scenarios where he could become like an 8th round pick by Best Ball Mania 3 close. Or 4 close.
I mean, if he gets drafted by the Detroit Lions and the Detroit Lions trade Jared Goff to someone for a 3rd round pick, he is a 6th round pick.
That's the Trey Lance scenario, I think, right there. But yeah, I mean, if he lands, what are the I think everyone's talking about Detroit and Seattle as landing spots for him because it makes sense, like sitting a year behind Goff or Geno Smith. But I'm trying to think of like the teams that are just a open book at quarterback right now where you'd want him to land. It might be Las
Falcons
Vegas
or Titans.
If they can trade up. The Falcons, yeah, those are good too.
Well, the Colts could sit there at 4 and probably just take him. The Colts could probably not trade at all, and I think he'll probably be there because it obviously depends on what the eventual trade between what Chicago does with the first pick, but Houston's for sure taking Young or Stroud, and I think Arizona's just going to sit and just take whoever. I don't know. I mean, I'm not
some defensive player we don't know.
Yeah, Will Anderson.
Will Anderson
or something. Yeah, Will Anderson or I guess probably not Jalen Carter because of this whatever, which sets up pretty good for Indianapolis. Although you sort of get the sense that that's the team that's going to take Will Levis though. That's the fly in the ointment is that you get the sense that the Colts are the team that's going to take Levis.
Yeah. Is that you're saying under the scenario where both Young and Stroud are gone by 4? Yeah. Irsay does not seem like a Richardson guy for
he really does. Yeah, he really doesn't. Although the guy they hired, Shane Steichen, he seems like an Anthony Richardson guy. He true. Seems like I just spent 2 years with Jalen Hurts. Like, let me get a more athletic, worse throwing version of Jalen Hurts and just coach him up, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. For what it's worth, on like grinding the mocks in similar sites, Anthony Richardson has jumped Levis. Grinding the mocks has him at 5th now, with Levis at 9th. So I do see that for the Colts specifically, potentially going with Levis, but that flip is pretty interesting post combine. And yeah, I wonder again, like how much of this combine bump from Richardson is real versus like double counting what we.
It's totally double counting.
Yeah, but I get at the same time, like I think GMs are human too, and they see Richardson at the combine and they're like, "God damn, like this guy's a freak." Like they might be double counting it too.
It was the vert jump for me. It was the I mean the weight and the 40 and everything. Like I knew he was going to be fast because I watched so much of him. But watching a man that size who's not a wide receiver generate that much velocity with his body, I'm like, you're just not going to be able to sack this guy. Like this guy is just not going to be sackable.
Well, you know what else I thought was dumb? Like all the discourse, I was like, why do I care how high this guy can jump? It's like we just watched Jalen Hurts and the Eagles like redefine what QB sneaks meant because of his athleticism and strength. You're telling me like what Cam Newton used to do at the goal line with overstretching, that a guy who can jump out of the gym wouldn't be a good skill to have when you're near the goal line or trying to get a first down? Seems like a pretty handy thing to be able to do.
Maybe the biggest play of the Super Bowl until the hold had that stupid Smith-Schuster hold not happened, the biggest play of the Super Bowl would have been Jalen Hurts double efforting through for the 2-point conversion where he was wrapped up 3 yards away and was just like, I'm not going down. And it's like, yeah, Bryce Young's never doing that. Bryce Young, you have to throw on that play. You know, CJ Stroud even, you have to throw on that play. But Anthony Richardson just, he's going to be so good, but it's like there's going to be his first start or whatever, it's going to be a lot of people, the Anthony Richardson faders, like he's going to go like 10 for 27 with 2 picks. And there's going to be a lot of people who are like, why would you take this guy?
Well, think about what I always remember Lamar's first year, right? Where he took over it was like the last 2 to 3 games of the season, which for us best ball bros drafting these tournament teams, we would be stoked on that. They did not let him throw. He had a really high floor. He was putting up like 18 points a game. I don't think he ever crested even like 20 points. He had this like tight band where he was rushing a lot. He was giving you that floor. And that I do think that is the downside risk, right? Where it's like he's getting it all on the ground. It's not clicking for him to throw, and he's actually more of a high floor than a high ceiling guy that first year.
Yeah, and Pete, you're even underselling. I looked at Jackson's rookie year. I was kind of digging into comps for Richardson. He averaged 21 points per game and was the quarterback. 21. If you look at points per game over that 6 games, I think it was a 7-game stretch actually that he started at the end of the year. He was at 21 points per game. So yeah, like you said, it was all rushing. Like the passing was kind of ugly, but that can get you to, you know, QB5, QB10 range in fantasy, even if you don't have the passing figured out yet. So, yeah, that we can, I don't know, we might as well jump into the charts since we already talked about Richardson here. He is once again one of the biggest risers of the week, topped only by Darnell Washington, our guy here on chip chasing. So
which is not, I need to get ahead of this. Darnell Washington is like a dog to score 50 fantasy points this year. This man is going to be one of the most aggressive run blockers in the entire league. I would.
So what? Is Darnell Washington available? Put Darnell Washington in the queue. This guy, you guys are going to like him. This dude is massive.
Oh shit. This dude is fucking massive. I just had to make sure you were putting some respect on our name here. When first, I mean, we have a clip. Come on,
he's great. I'm not saying like don't take him in dynasty. He's going to be a first round pick. But like I think Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer each of them might catch 400% more passes each than him.
But isn't that the most likely outcome for all of these rookies, right? That
Sure,
they're not contributors,
sure.
But in the event that they do get on the field and whether there's an injury or they carve out a role, they have the athleticism and the talent profile to smash.
I mean, I guess, so the way I think about rookie tight ends is I kind of like the guys more like, and this is, I mean, I don't know, this could be cold takes exposed, but I kind of like the Isaiah Likely guys, where Likely was like a good athlete, but not like, I think his RAS was like 7.5 or something. Like it was good, but Likely played at a smaller school in college and he was their leading receiver. He just was so used to catching passes. And his like, I think Likely had like I think he led the Ravens in targets per route run. Like it was not when he was on the field, it was to run routes. What you don't want with your rookie tight end is for him to become Eric Tomlinson. You know, that's not a good role. But it's tight end. So fair. It's tight. If in week 17, you know, he gets drafted by whoever, he's got a good role, or he's on the field. Like maybe you could compare it to something like, would Noah Gray this last year where he was blocking only, but had Travis Kelce suffered an injury? Like Noah Gray probably would have been a really good week 17 guy you'd want to have.
Well, in the most likely scenario is he's like Darnell Washington ends up being like the Donald Parham type, where we're forever chasing it because we could see the story and tell it, but it just like never pans out. And I think I've seen this take floating around, and I think I agree with it. Like, isn't the flyer to take Sam Laporta? Isn't he the guy most likely to carve out a role by the end of the season where the teams are trusting him and he already has kind of the tools to immediately contribute?
Well, same deal. He was a leading receiver at I was not a small school, but it's not like
It's tight end bro.
Yeah, it's not a college football playoff school. I guess the other thing that's interesting at tight end is you're not really being asked to pay a huge price on Kincaid right now. I mean, he's 2 rounds cheaper, but again, he would be a guy where I'm like, he didn't do anything at the combine because he's banged up, I think. But he was same deal, like actually a more competitive school, and he wasn't their leading receiver this year. He was last year.
Yeah, and I think with these tight ends too, like so much of it, I think for me will come down to landing spot, right? Like there's a ton of wide open tight end depth charts in the NFL right now. Like Dallas if Schultz leaves, Cincinnati, Hurst is a free agent, Gerald Everett's a free agent for the Chargers. Like if one of those guys lands in one of those spots, they're going to shoot up boards. But we also often see rookie.
Is it finally Parham season? Are the Chargers just going to roll with Parham year 7 for Donald Parham?
It's either that or giving Josh Palmer 10 targets a game, which sounds awful.
That was so bad. Hate it. All right, let's move to Richardson. Last thing on Richardson. Yeah. So I think the popular comps for how his career could go are it's Lamar, it's Josh Allen, and it's Jalen Hurts. Those are kind of the one, and Cam Newton actually. Mm-hmm. So, and I said this to Sam before the show. I actually think the Allen comp makes a lot of sense which is kind of actually bad for fantasy for this year, because Allen was not a good thrower at Wyoming. He really wasn't. You go back and look at it. Like this guy was not winning games. He was not good at Wyoming, but he had all the tools. And you would think that because he's so big and he's such a good rusher, and that's what we associate with him now, that he would have been good for fantasy as a rookie, but he wasn't. He was awful. And I think that Richardson can work out long term. I think he can end up getting the mega deal by the end of his rookie contract and still just be kind of like 15, 16, 17, 18 fantasy points per game as a rookie.
I guess to push back slightly on that, in the context of ADP this year, Richardson at 150 is still the quarterback 25.
Big
Josh
difference.
Allen his rookie year, he put up 17 points per game. That was good enough for quarterback 18. So I'm with you there. Like if his ADP rises to the Trey Lance range of like 90 to 100, then I start to like get that argument a little bit more. But I think at 150, like if he gets 17 points per game, that's a small win at that price. Now he definitely has more downside risk to not start games, but I think it's just like 150 seems high and he's risen a ton, but it's still like not that crazy for the overall
context quarterback makes these ADPs different than they would have been historically, because the top end quarterbacks are going so high, which is even pushing up that vanilla tier of pocket passers.
I think one thing that's really interesting about Richardson and how his ADP is going to go is going to be in the difference between the pre and post-draft contest, right? Where having the 20 rounds, it makes the 3 QB builds with Richardson. It just feels like pure upside. I'll tack him on as my 3rd QB and I can still survive, advance. I can win. When we get to Best Ball Mania, if his ADP moves up, you are basically only going to be able to pair him with like a Mahomes, Allen, Hurts in a 2 QB build, or be forced to use him in 3 QB builds. You aren't going to be able to do Jared Goff and Anthony Richardson builds like in Best Ball Mania. So I think the way you're able to draft him is going to really narrow for Best Ball Mania 4.
Yeah. That makes sense.
I
wanted to bring up some other, I was thinking today, I was looking like quarterbacks drafted in the last 10 years or so in the, top 20 picks that came in with pretty unpolished passing profiles, but strong to medium-ish rushing profiles. Some other guys I thought of that are not really brought up in the context of Richardson for a variety of reasons, but Daniel Jones is maybe another one, not the best passing prospect, but really athletic. He averaged 17 points per game his rookie year, so that's sort of another median outcome you could think of. A couple other guys that were more like faceplant I'd say, were Mitch Trubisky and Ryan Tannehill. Their rookie years were pretty disastrous. They were at 10 points per game, but they did start a bunch of games, at least their rookie year. And then I guess the other downside comps are obviously like Trey Lance, Jordan Love, you could say, but those guys are different for a variety of reasons. But yeah, just wanted to bring those comps up in the context of Richardson for what, potential range of outcomes for his rookie year.
What's this boomerang graphic here?
Oh, yes.
Is this a new one?
Boomerang, yeah. I didn't have to update the legend, but Boomerang is a guy who was the biggest faller the week before, and now Boomerang to the biggest riser. So
people BTFD'd. All right.
Yeah, Chase Brown, he was falling a bunch. I think there was just no buzz about him, but he had a really strong combine. So yeah, he's probably a good guy worth talking about. Pretty strong 40-time, high relative athletic score. I think he was a 5-year guy, strong producer as a senior. I'm actually curious, Davis, on your take on him as a prospect, because curious if you think this bump from the combine is something you're buying, or if he's a guy you're not that interested in.
No, I mean, this is like the exact type of guy I'm pretty interested in. Like, he got better every single year. Would make sense. Makes sense why he was not an early declare, because he only got to play. He was right there in the middle of that COVID stuff. His early declare year would have been 2020, so he never really got to start. Really did well in his age 21 season, and then his final season was just a stone workhorse for a not very good team. Like, if this guy was a wide receiver, Cedric Tillman, like, I've got real concerns about Cedric Tillman. Overaged, stayed at school when he could have left, and probably cost himself some money because Hyatt was so much better than him this final season. But for a running back, I don't really care. Running back to me is kind of like three-pronged. It's like, one, are you a Deuce Vaughn type where it's like best case scenario you're getting like 12 touches a game, or can you just be James Conner? Two, what does your athleticism look like? Obviously a huge boon, I think, when your athleticism goes up. And then three, can I squint and see something that an NFL team will love about you? Because that's really what we're looking for. Is like, which one of these guys is some running backs coach going to put on the film and be like, coach, you gotta take this guy with a 3rd round comp pick. We need Chase Brown. And he shows up and is 210 pounds and runs a 4.4. Like, good enough for me.
That makes sense. And yeah, if you look at the ADP versus consensus big boards, Chase Brown, according to NFL mock draft database, is ranked as the 6th highest running back in terms of consensus big boards. And he's going as like the RB 16 in terms of rookie running backs by ADP. So to me, that just seems like a pretty easy buy. And I expect his ADP to rise to the 180 range just based on the combine results. So definitely seems like a buy at the 220 spot. Yeah, other groups of guys we should talk about here. A couple of Saints pass catchers show up here as risers. That's obviously based on the Derek Carr news. And I think even Chris Olave would be close to making the cut here if, we extended this to 20 or 30 players instead of just 10. But again, both Rashid Shaheed, who's risen now for 2 weeks in a row, and Juwan Johnson are up here in terms of risers. Pete, curious if you've been mixing in Saints stacks since the Carr news and what your overall take is on the Saints prices here.
Yeah, I haven't been going out of my way. It's funny. I actually feel like Shaheed and Johnson are available for me in drafts, but it does seem like Carr is always off the board now a little bit earlier than I'm comfortable with. I'm not sure if the data backs that up or if that's just anecdotally in my drafts, but I think it makes sense, right? The market, I think, is correct to push Shaheed up, who could be the Matt Collins for Derek Carr, Juwan Johnson, who could do a poor man's Darren Waller and maybe stay healthier, and Olave being the Devontae Adams. So I certainly get the enthusiasm, or slightly more enthusiasm, now that it's not, some Taysom Hill and Andy Dalton hybrid at quarterback.
Yeah,
we're still taking Taysom though.
I'm sure. We.give.
We talked about the Taysom to Shaheed stacks are the key to winning BBM4.
I mean,
year.
Pete, the Taysom thesis has done nothing but improve, right? Because Jameis.
No. It hasn't improved because you had legit like Andy Dalton bench risk and Taysom Hill getting the job that way, where it's like Derek Carr's not going to get benched.
It seems like Jameis is they're renegotiating. It just seems like that relationship is a little bit fractured. It seems like Jameis might not be on the team, which gives more room for Taysom in case of injury. But he was the fucking tight end. He was the tight end 6, like throwing like 20 passes. Like the thesis remains intact.
Yeah. I will note here with Juwan Johnson, to put a little FUD on his name. He's a free agent right now. So I'm not entirely sure why I think people are assuming he comes back to the Saints. It's probably likely he comes back to the Saints, but guys like Hurst, guys like Gerald Everett, they're falling because they have uncertainty of whether they're going to be back. I think the market is just like assuming Johnson's on the Saints and that's pushing him up, but I'd be a little nervous about that one if he continues to rise higher because he could.
But you could argue it's bullish if he gets like a 2-year, $12 million deal, right? Like the Hayden Hurst contract. Like Hayden Hurst was useless for the Ravens, but then found a team that actually wanted to use him, and it ended up being way better for him. I mean, I think the market's doing the same thing with Dalton Schultz. Like Dalton Schultz is not going to be a Cowboy, but it's probably good for him to not be a Cowboy because whoever's going to sign him is going to want him.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think, it definitely introduces volatility. I was just interpreting it in the context of the Saints ADPs are rising, and I think Johnson's getting caught up in that basket, but he's not actually on the Saints right now. So I'd just be a little careful, but I agree with your point. There's definitely better landing spots than the Saints.
This Jerome Ford one is interesting because I think the market is again making another assumption that Dearness Johnson is not going to be on the Cleveland Browns. But I would assume that if Hunt leaves, which is what everyone's sort of anticipating, that Dearness Johnson would be ahead of Ford for whatever, because I think they still have a restricted ability on him. Maybe that's wrong, but I would imagine that Dearness Johnson would end up being ahead of Jerome Ford. Maybe it's not true.
I think they like Jerome Ford more in the passing game, though. It would be like Dearness Johnson would be like the Chubb replacement, and Ford would be more like the Kareem Hunt. But because wasn't Ford's like passing down role more entrenched last season when he was getting in the game compared to Dearness?
Well, I literally think he barely played. I don't even, was he even active?
I remember the reason I remember this is because I had been drafting a shit ton of Dearness Johnson because we were all hoping for like the 2-for-1 where Kareem Hunt would get like traded or something, and then he would get that. And then it never panned out. And then Dearness like never carved out much of a role.
Well, I guess what would actually probably be bullish is that Jerome Ford's almost for sure going to be on the roster because he was their primary kick returner last year. So that which is sort of the Isaiah Pacheco thesis from last year, which is that he's going to make the game day roster. So, yeah, I mean, it's like they're both pretty interesting just because that's a really good backfield to be investing in, and we don't have any clarity there. So probably they're both good stabs.
Yeah, I like the Ford pick. I'm glad this popped in the charts because I had never even thought to take him, but it seems pretty smart. Given Hunt's a free agent.
There's some fun ones like this of like because right now you have the rookies and none of them, they're all just like black boxes and we tell ourselves the most rosy story. Same with all these free agent guys. Like there are so many good options right now that I think even more than ever, like scrolling down past the guys that are drafted in every one is such a good strategy. Like one that I drafted the other day because I was like on a Minnesota build and I took Ty Chandler late. Just being like some of these guys who aren't getting drafted that correlate with your team that have some kind of like prospect profile that hints that they could seize a good role. And then plus you get, Madison potentially leaving, who knows the deal with Dalvin Cook, but just like a thought that it is easy to click like our Pierre Strongs who are like being drafted now in every single draft at the end. And just as the Badge Bros say, scroll just a little bit further down.
Well, that's the Samaj Pirine thesis from last year. Like Pirine was not drafted in every league. In fact, I think he was drafted quite a bit less than Chris Evans was.
Yeah.
And Chris Evans like literally did not see the field, and Pirine was super valuable throughout the course of the season.
I had like 30% Chris Evans. I don't know where that earworm got into my brain, but I was just clicking.
That was a cabal push.
I know where it was Josh Norris. Josh Norris was a big Chris Evans maxi. We got Van Jefferson here planting a flag on March 10th Tutu Atwell scores more fantasy points than
I
Van
was just
Jefferson.
gonna say, isn't Tutu better than Van Jeff?
Yes, he is. I think again, I'm not drafting a ton right now. Mental health, like it's good to be doing this and keeping track of stuff and knowing what ADPs are, but I just know I get so burnt out by August, and if I was just doing 5 drafts a day right now, I would have nothing left to try and get to 0.5 of a Crane in 2023. But Tutu Atwell right now, I'm flag planning. Like I will have a ton, assuming he remains outside of the top 150 picks, I'm going to be like, he's going to be my Tyquan Thornton. He's going to be my equivalent of Pete's Tyquan Thornton.
But what you really want is Pat's equivalent of Tyquan Thornton, so you win the $2 million with him, not just have your Skolansky bucks.
Well, I mean, Skolansky's still spend at some institutions.
I think Levis is another interesting one here, just based on the draft capital. Like if he's going to go in the top 10, maybe there's a little more uncertainty about that now with Richardson flipping him, but pick 200. I mean, especially in these 20-round drafts where you're normally going 3 QB, I was taking a decent amount of Levis. Just like it's so cheap. We're always wrong about which quarterbacks are actually good and bad. And like, I don't know, if he goes in the top 10, he's going to start a bunch of games this year. I'm pretty confident in that outside of a couple weird landing spots. So he's a guy that I'm okay with at that price.
I mean, this is the dynasty rookie draft argument that leads to you ending up with Justin Herbert sometimes, or Daniel Jones sometimes, where the market tracks draft capital so closely until it's a guy they don't like, until it's like a guy who's not sexy like Will Levis, and his distribution of fantasy points should just be like the quarterback who gets picked 5th sometimes, but no one likes him.
I'm calling it right now. Next week, Levis has the boomerang after Reeves just like body bagged him on ship chasing on Wednesday. I think we start to see his stock drop a little bit and he gets the boomerang treatment.
Yeah, he's not a very good prospect, but neither was Daniel Jones.
But what do we think was contributing to his rise here? Because again, all the talk out of the combine was obviously Richardson, Stroud in the passing drills. Where is this steam coming from on him?
That's a good question. Was it like, how was his testing? It was good, but not like above expectation, right?
I thought it was just like average for what people.
I would say it's probably just quarterbacks just pushing up, right? I would say that's pretty much all it is just the natural. So if Richardson's going early, that means a team that would have taken Richardson as their 3rd quarterback in a 20-round draft missed out on Richardson, so they have to get another 3rd quarterback because they structured their team in such a way to need 3.
Yeah.
And Hendon Hooker and McKee were like useless and are not going to play at all. So if there was any backdoor of them starting, that's like totally gone.
I kind of buy that. And like how I think a lot of people are approaching these drafts is just like, there's 20 rounds. You might as well get 3 quarterbacks unless you took like Josh Allen and, Dak Prescott or something like that. And then there's a huge tier break at quarterback, like after Levis, I think like there's basically no one after him that you can really project to start games next year. So I think it is that, Davis, where it's just like, I want to get 3 quarterbacks. Like there's 0 opportunity cost at pick 198 at the other positions. Like just get me a quarterback who's going to start games. And you like that's going to make these guys creep up a little bit, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's correct.
All right. At the risk of doing we're all trying to find the guy who did this. Why is Skyy Moore continuing to go up? I mean, we barely even talk about him. Where is this coming from?
I think it's basically that Hardman is gone. I think it's like almost confirmed at this point that Hardman's gone. There's been no Hardman might take a discount to stay in Kansas City type. It's just none of that. Like he's gone. So the
roles they even play, like I'm not even convinced Skyy Moore's role is like directly correlated.
Doesn't Juju? Yeah, I was gonna say, does Juju matter more than Hardman? That's what I'm.
That would be my thought.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's like
I guess they both matter.
Yeah, it's like Hardman also had the best targets per route run of his career, I believe. Like they were finding ways to use him more because he was having such a good season, and so I would say probably yeah, I don't know. I don't know what this is because MVS is on the team. MVS is not coming off the field. If you're wanting to be a Skyy Moore bull, what you would be saying is the Justin Watson stuff is done. Justin Watson just disappears, and Skyy eats all of those snaps somehow.
The problem with that thesis is like Justin Watson was like a veteran minimum contract. So if someone like him can come in and immediately overtake Skyy, like that's what scares me. Is it's like I don't think it takes much in terms of a slot wide receiver to have me worried about Skyy's playing time. Like I don't know, Isaiah McKenzie gets cut from the Bills and he goes to the Chiefs. Like he could overtake Skyy. Like I don't know. Like I'm pretty bearish on the talent for Skyy right now, where I don't think it takes a ton for him to get pushed back in the pecking order. So,
I mean, hey, to be fair, he's got a really fucking cool name, right?
Cut it. Cut the bullshit. I do think that like the bull case is Juju's not back. Then we're gonna see Skyy Moore be at a top 100 pick again.
Oh my God. I can't do that.
It feels to me, honestly, after watching Mahomes have the best season of his career and win MVP and win a Super Bowl while getting absolutely nothing out of Smith-Schuster in the second half of the season, absolutely nothing out of MVS, absolutely nothing out of Skyy. It's like, I think the thesis was always like, yeah, if you're in a Mahomes offense, like you're just going to be valuable for fantasy. But I literally, it's like, it's Tony and it's Kelsey and whoever they decide to be the passing down back. Like those are the guys who I think are going to provide the excess value. I just don't think there are any, like, even if Smith-Schuster does get retained, I don't think he seems like he's going to he'll just be pretty useless again, probably.
I like that. And, speaking of Chiefs passing down backs, I think this is an interesting one to talk about now. We're now looking at the largest ADP fallers. A lot of similar names on here that we've seen before, the dusty tight ends, Ertz, Hayden Hurst, Brock Purdy, injury news. Although he did finally get surgery today, but it continues to kind of look bearish. McKinnon is the one I want to talk about. He's fallen, I think, for 3 weeks in a row. And my take on this when I saw it is just I think people are forgetting what he did in the regular season. Obviously, he faded a bit in the playoffs, but he was a really good fantasy asset, particularly in best ball down the regular season stretch last year. Obviously, risky doesn't come back to the Chiefs, but my take at pick 185 continuing to fall, I want some Jerick McKinnon just on the chances he's back in that same role as last year. Pete, what do you think about McKinnon at that price?
Yeah, I'm with you. I had been one of the guys who had been passing on him, but as he continues to drop, I do think I haven't been taking a lot of Mahomes just because I haven't been taking a lot of early QB, but I don't know if I said this on another show, but I think I would feel much more comfortable tacking McKinnon on 2 Mahomes stacks, just knowing it's so directly correlated with him having that role and the Chiefs offense rolling that I don't necessarily love him quite as much as like a one-off, but yeah, as his price drops, I mean, there's not that much risk with it. And we're not going to let Pat push this fucking CEH take.
Well, isn't it? I mean, to me, it's a little bit concerning that he was not really used in their playoff games. That feels not great. That's actually sort of similar to what happened with Damian Williams. If we want to put our brains there, that Damian Williams took on this outsized role in his first playoffs. And McKinnon, 11 carries against the Jaguars, 4 carries against the Bengals, 4 carries against the Eagles, and did get 7 targets in the playoffs, but was out-targeted in the playoffs by Pacheco. But also, Jerick McKinnon is about to turn 31, and the team let Darrell Williams go. Darrell Williams was so useful for them. Good pass blocker, all that stuff. But when it just feels like he's probably not.
That's my thing is like he doesn't have to be the starter going into the year. He doesn't even have to be like the second guy going into the year for this pick to be worth it, right? That's what I'm thinking with McKinnon is like he's a guy they trust. I doubt they're going to make a big splashy like free agent running back signing. Like they don't need to. That their cap situation, it's probably better spent on wide receiver or defense or O-line. Like if McKinnon's not going to cost them much, I think he's more likely to be back than not. But yeah.
And when you look where he's going around like super fringe rookie picks like Tank Bigsby and Zach Evans and Kendre Miller. He's going like handcuff running backs or free agent running backs like Jalen Warren, Rashad Penny. Like there just isn't a huge opportunity cost where he's going.
What if Deuce Vaughn is the 7th round draft pick for the Kansas City Chiefs? What if we willed Skyy Moore to the Kansas City Chiefs? Can we use our powers for good and will Deuce Vaughn to be the passing down back for Kansas City?
He's the guy who tested in smaller than you, right, Davis? Or
he's literally the smallest player in the history of the NFL Combine. Yeah, pretty nuts. But I don't know. He's like what was Doug Martin, the muscle hamster dude. He just is. He's small, but he's absolutely rocked up. What if Robert Woods signs with the Kansas City Chiefs, though? That is something. I don't even want to put that out there, but it does feel like he could be like the DeMarcus Robinson or whatever.
Woods is the one I did want to bring that up because it's obviously disgusting. But at pick 226, he looked dust last year, but he was coming off an ACL tear. Like, we have seen guys take 2 years to come back from that. Now, is he coming back to being the old Robert Woods? Definitely not. But he feels a little bit like the Julio closing line value pick for last year, where you're gonna get CLV on this pick. It might not pay off, but those April victory laps on Robert Woods are gonna get a lot of engagement. So draft him now.
Well, you probably have multiple outs with Robert Woods because he's definitely signing for a good team. Robert Woods is not continuing his career to go catch passes from Jared Stidham in Las Vegas. It's like his market is probably Bills, Chiefs, Eagles, Cowboys, maybe, some team that has reasonable postseason aspirations.
Yeah. It does a return to the Buffalo Bills for Robert Woods, and then doing what they've done with Jamison Crowder and Cole Beasley. That almost seems too perfect.
Yeah, Adam Thielen in Kansas City, we don't want him. That's
yeah.
So this comment is your heart's in the right place. But I actually think anyone Kansas City brings in, I think they kind of learned their lesson with Juju, actually. I think anyone they bring in, they're going to be like, can you still run a 4-4? If not, it's just you don't fit in what we're doing. We got 2 really good slow guys in Noah Gray and Travis Kelce who basically cannot move up the field with a quickness, and everyone else has got to be able to book it.
Where is Thielen going now? I know he's not on this chart, but okay, he's going to pick 173. I don't know. I guess I don't know. I'm not going to force a take on that one. That seems.
I'll force it. I'll force a take. I'll force a take. Adam Thielen going to be a really good advance rate player. Probably turns in 60 catches, 800 yards, 5 touchdowns. Right? He does the Jamison Crowder. You're absolutely drawing dead to be needing Adam Thielen in week 17. That's my take. Adam Thielen is like reverse what you want.
You have to hit a 4-leg parlay. It's like he goes to the perfect landing spot. There's an injury in front of him. He taps into the fountain of youth, and he has a 2-touchdown game in week 16. That's what you have to do with Thielen. God, that's going to get clipped when he's fucking league winner next year. God damn it.
He probably needs to switch the slot now too, right? I don't think he can win on the outside anymore. So he's got to evolve to the Ertz-Gerald role somewhere.
I mean, if Adam Thielen was tight end eligible, sign me up. I would be all over this dude if he was tight end eligible.
Yeah, I mean, if Taysom's tight end eligible, I don't see why not.
This Brock Purdy ADP, I don't have any takes on Hurst, McIntosh, Zamir White, or McBride really, but Purdy. Now that I guarantee when we do this next week, we're gonna have the boomerang probably on Purdy because of the news that he had. Successful surgery literally today, and he is expected to be basically cleared by week 1, which was kind of not, we talked about Purdy last week. That was not the conversation. It was kind of the opposite.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll swing back around. I mean, it feels like, Pete, I think I heard you talk about this in a podcast. To me, I'm kind of not that interested in Lance or Purdy unless I'm stacking. And then I think if you're stacking, it's totally fine to take either. I know you talked about how, if you miss out on Lance, you'll tack Purdy onto your Ayuk or Kittle teams. And I think that's totally fine. I think it's a very unpredictable situation. The injury, there's a ton of uncertainty about that. Lance, we have no idea how good he is, if he's going to hold on to that job. It feels to me like I think, San Francisco's Super Bowl odds are still like the 4th highest in the NFL. So like the market believes that San Francisco is going to be good somehow. It's just like, I don't know if it's with Purdy or with Lance. So like, I'm fine with stacking. I'm fine with stacking either of those guys, but I'm probably not taking that much on stacked.
Yeah, and especially like if you think about like Brock Purdy's ceiling, like how often is Brock Purdy getting to 30 points in a game? And he's going to be your QB3 in these big board builds. So how many times is he displacing your top 2 quarterback scorers in a really important week? It definitely seems like a tougher needle to thread, but he's also extremely cheap. So
yeah, he did have that, against Seattle in the playoffs. He did put me in first place very briefly in the FFPC playoff challenge with, I think he had like 35, 40 point game. But yeah,
screenshot equity was high.
He did because Pete
really
Pete told me I shouldn't be taking Mahomes Purdy teams in the mitten returns or whatever. And then
how'd that work out for you?
I got him a Mahomes Purdy team to the final.
I didn't want to bring up the Purdy playoff stuff for Pete. I know that's really
it's
triggering.
It's a sore subject here. What about, so we mentioned Robert Woods. We got some other dusty vets on here, Zach Ertz, Hayden Hurst, and then some rookies. What else jumps out to you guys on the fallers?
Zamir White, I guess, because I guess the market is maybe saying like he's maybe not even for sure the handcuff. Jacobs is on the franchise tag or whatever. Like there was some chance that Zamir White was the starting running back for like a tanking Raiders team next year or whatever. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
They'll probably,
The Sean Tucker one jumps out to me. I'll use this to jump into the rookies. We're not looking at rookie ADP versus the NFL mock draft database consensus big board. Sean Tucker was one that was popping for a while. It's just like his ADP on Underdog made no sense when you compared it to like how consensus big boards ranking these guys. Like he's at pick 140, but he's only viewed as like the RB 12 to 15 in this class, like behind guys like Chase Brown, Kenny McIntosh, Zach Evans that are going much later in Underdog draft. So I never was taking him up there. I guess I'm not like huge into the dynasty community to know exactly why he had so much buzz on Underdog initially, but I think it was just a bad ADP that's going to correct over the next couple of weeks. Like I think he'll continue to fall. But I don't claim to know much about him individually, just sort of from a macro lens. The ADP didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, he's probably going to be a day 3 pick. So I think you're probably right.
It feels good to see A-Chain where he's going because he's a guy I just continue to select over and over. I've been surprised after his combine that people aren't chasing him up more. I thought for sure I would have been priced out of him, and he just like falls in most of my drafts.
Well, people thought he was going to run like a 4.25. So his combine was actually viewed as like slightly disappointing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, which is crazy too, because when you're thinking about like the functional use of like speed at those levels, like, I mean, wasn't he 4.3? Like,
yeah,
I mean,
4.34, I think.
It's like, do we really think that's impacting what he's able to do on the football field versus if he was 4.29?
You never know, Peter.
Yeah. I mean, plus like I saw, I'm not gonna remember who showed this, but someone like extrapolated his track times to like his 40 times. Like I think he's had recorded times at like real events that are faster than his 40 time was, if that makes sense. Like it's kind of known that like he could be, maybe 4.29, maybe for whatever reason that day he was just slightly slower. So I don't think the speed is a concern with him. But again, to your point, Davis, of like an NFL team just needing to see like one trait in a running back to fall in love with them on day 2, like A-Chain has that, right? Like I feel pretty good about the draft capital compared to like you see a huge tier break here from A-Chain to like the next cluster of guys. Like there's so much uncertainty, after him and Charbonnet. I think those are the last two. That we can
all the people taking Charbonnet are so going to have turned on him by like week 7. They're going to be like this Brian Robinson ass plotting guy. They're going to be just everyone's like, oh, draft capital. His highlights look cool because the UCLA uniforms are so eye pleasing. And, it's going to be week 4. He's in a backfield split with Rashad White and just generating nothing. And people are going to turn on him so hard.
Yeah, he's kind of the guy who does, everything okay, but nothing great, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
The guy I keep coming back to is Roschon Johnson, where some team is just for sure drafting him to be the bodyguard of whoever their young quarterback is, and I just that it's a really valuable role in my opinion. And people are stoked on this Kendre Miller guy who is good in college, but I've seen our buddy Dalton Cates was launching some takes about him being like a huge value in dynasty drafts, which is interesting.
Interesting. He did not test at the combine, is that right?
Yeah. I believe that is accurate. Yeah.
Okay. Because I haven't seen any buzz about him. Yeah, I know on Roschon, I saw that like his 40 time, I think some people thought he maybe was going to be like a freak athlete, and he wasn't quite that, but for his size, his 40 time was still good. And also I think his 10-yard split was like 1.53 or 1.54 or something like that, which is quite good compared to the class, especially at his size. And I think some people even say that the 10-yard split is like more predictive than the 40-yard dash for running back. So I thought that was interesting that his split, 10-yard split was still really high.
Would your take be like this cluster up here, after A-Chain, and basically to just be sprinkling these guys in with a slight lean toward the guys above the trend line, just knowing, and to your point, Davis, like a guy like Charbonnet, like is probably much closer to these guys in opportunity and talent and role than he is to Gibbs.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's talked about that with Corain on Monday. It's like Bijan's in a tier of his own. Gibbs is in a tier of his own. Pretty big gap. And then honestly, I think Charbonnet's probably in a tier of his own. And honestly, I think you could argue even our good friend Devin Achane is also in a tier of his own, then with a big grouping after that. And obviously this will even out a little bit after the NFL draft, and we know where these guys are going and how the NFL views them. But like the way Sam has this graph plotted out looks about right to me, where it's kind of throw your hands up and say, and one thing we do know that's, I guess, important to point out is that like minimum of 4 of these guys are going to be fantasy relevant. We're going to have a Tyler Algier who like no one's really in love with, who just shows up and is like super useful in half PPR scoring.
Yeah, I think it'll be really important to map out the landing spots, and I don't fully have my mind wrapped around that yet. But like, if the Dolphins take a guy in round 5 and don't re-sign Mostert and only have Jeff Wilson back or something like that, like that's going to be a guy people target. Like I think like thinking through all of those depth chart outcomes is going to be really important for that sort of cluster of Kenny McIntosh to Kendre Miller, that whole cluster there. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. I do want to get one guy that popped in the risers as we moved to wide receiver here was Marvin Mims. I think he was the 3rd biggest riser after Anthony Richardson. He had a really strong combine, but Davis, you're deeper on the prospect stuff than both of us are. What is your take on him as a prospect? And is he the guy sort of like after Downs, Flowers, or Hyatt are gone? Is he like the sleeper guy we should be targeting?
I think he's better than Josh Downs. I think his chances of being he was like a big speed guy at Oklahoma. I mean, Downs is really small. Downs was like 173 pounds. Mims is too, but Mims is even faster. Mims was a higher tier of recruit, right? Oklahoma versus University of North Carolina. Mims is younger. Mims is an early declare. Mims was a freshman breakout. He's, I mean, obviously it's lazy to do this, but like, it would not be surprising if his sort of NFL usage kind of mimics his former college teammate, Marquise Brown. That would sort of be the hope, basically. And I kind of see it.
He should, like, looking at this chart, like he should be going not ahead of Keyshawn Butte at this point, right? Like draft capital.
Booty, he's done. He's done. He hit the parlay of character concerns, injury, senior year underperformance, and shitty combine. It's like I think he could have showed up to the combine and made himself a 1st round pick. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes day 3 now.
Yeah, and he doesn't even have like the injury excuse that we saw for guys like why am I blanking on the Steelers wide receiver? George Pickens.
Pickens.
Who obviously had the excuse last year with injury. Like he doesn't have any of that, maybe some off the field stuff, but it really seems pretty bad for him at this point.
That was the hope. The hope was that Booty would be like, because he was like a 5-star recruit, went to LSU, yada yada. The hope was that what happened for Pickens would happen for him, which is strong combine, did a good job in the interviews and everything. It just does not sound like that's happening for him. I think the guys that I would push up the most would be Tillman, Hutchinson, and Mims probably.
And would you guys agree, like looking at this cluster, similar to the running back cluster? I mean, it's so much easier for me to select these random running back flyers than it is these rookie wide receiver flyers. Because at least we're talking about Mims. He has the traits in the speed to get on the field and be a spike week guy, like when it matters the most. But some of these guys, like the path just seems so much harder, especially with where their draft capital is going to be.
And even like if some of these guys get the sort of Tyquan Thornton unexpected round 2 pick, like they're not going to rise that much. Like, Tyquan Thornton, I think, was picked 200 last year, right? Obviously, terrible situation in New England, so that contributed to it. But like, my point being is like, even if one of these guys gets unexpected draft capital, the market's not going to be that excited about them. So I'm not like worried about taking them now. Like I'll take them when they rise 20 or 30 picks, but I don't want to take a bunch of Xavier Hutchinson or something and have it turn out that he's, like the Seth Williams of a couple years ago or some of these guys that just fall off the face of the earth.
Yeah. That is sort of like the general risk to be run. Yeah.
Yep. Let's move on to the stacks here. So now we're looking at average double stack ADP. So this is taking the quarterbacks ADP averaged with their top 2 pass catchers, which can be either running back or either tight end or wide receiver for pass catchers. I also added in here the odds to win the Super Bowl in this chart as just like a rough proxy of how good do we think the offense is going to be. Obviously that's not a 1-to-1 correlation, but generally you see teams with high odds of winning the Super Bowl on the left of the chart, teams with low odds on the far right-hand side of the chart. The team that I think is most interesting, and we've touched on them before, is the Jets. If you look at the double stack ADP, they're like one of the 6 or 7 cheapest teams. Now that doesn't factor in Rodgers. If Rodgers were to be factored into that, that'd be a little bit more expensive, but still pretty cheap. With this news that the Rodgers deal is sort of coming together a little bit in New York, do you think they should be a lot higher? And I guess I'll throw that to you, Pete. Have you been doing some Rodgers Jets stuff in these drafts?
I did a little bit. I'm not like going out of my way to do it necessarily. Also, we should mention that the preeminent owner source around these places, Crack Rock, has even kind of walked back. He said it's happening. It's a done deal. Rodgers to the Jets. And then he goes, there's a fly in the ointment. And that is Devontae Adams' relationship with Aaron Rodgers. And now the Raiders making a push here. So, which is what we all thought all along, right? The conventional wisdom was Adams was going to be a pretty big draw for Rodgers. So I don't know. I think it's one of those things that I know it's like a cop-out to say as a tiebreaker. Like if you're deciding between 2 quarterbacks, you have Garrett Wilson, like Aaron Rodgers in that range, obviously makes sense. But I think it's a little silly to be like going out of your way to try to guess these free agent stacks.
Yeah. I mean, that seems about right, especially because like, there's sort of this weird element of like, there's going to be, I feel like if somehow Best Ball Mania 4 was open now and we were drafting these teams now versus what would be drafting in 6 months, then I'd be like, yeah, it's so much more likely that I have like this really unique Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson, CJ Uzama, whatever, Tyler Johnson stack. But because it's going to be in such a compressed time form and because the total number of teams are lower, I think the uniqueness matters a little bit less too. So again, I'm not saying not to do it, but it wouldn't be something I'd be like, every time I take Garrett Wilson, I'm putting the star on Aaron Rodgers.
The thing that's tough too is like, it feels to me that Garrett Wilson's price is already like baking in Rodgers being there. Like he's way up there in the end of the second round. And I know there's people who are super bullish on him. He had an amazing rookie year, but to me, like it's tough to see him going that much higher, even when Rodgers, even if Rodgers does go there. So
yeah, what are we going to be take Garrett Wilson in the first round? You know, like probably not
around here,
No.
maybe, but in most sane drafts, no.
Yeah, exactly. And again, and also like, no, go ahead, Pete.
I was just going to say, if Rodgers doesn't go to the Jets, who do you guys think is the most likely quarterback to be their week 1 starter?
Zach Wilson.
That's the thing with the Wilson ADP. Like, I don't want to be the anti-Wilson guy, but it's not accurately capturing the downside risk of Wilson being back and starting, or just like, you know, your Jacoby Brissett, like, you know, Jared Stidham, whatever, like the, you know, run-of-the-mill free agent quarterback signing is if Rodgers doesn't go there. I don't think it's factoring the downside enough at the end of the second round. So I'm a little hesitant on taking him just because of that. Like, I think I'll still get him at the same price even if Rodgers goes there, but I think he does fall like maybe a full round, at least a half a round if it's a bad situation there.
If we know Zach Wilson is still on the roster and they don't have a veteran solution, which I don't know, it would feel crazy for them to do that given how good they were like at every other position than quarterback last year. But there's got to be some chance that that's what they do. And removing that chance entirely makes Garrett Wilson a different pick.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Other teams that stand out here, I think the Giants are super cheap. I think, you know, they're likely to add a free agent wide receiver or maybe someone in the draft. So I think it's a little bit tough to like project Hodgins and Slayton and Bellinger as like the top pass catchers now, because I think a lot will change in their passing room. But if those are the top guys, I think that, like, you know, you can always backdoor a Daniel Jones Giant stack that I think has pretty solid weekly upside given Jones's rushing. And, you know, you can always connect on a deep ball to Slayton or random touchdown to Bellinger. So I like that one if you're sort of feeling boxed out of stacks later in drafts. Anything else standing out to you guys here as teams that are either too cheap or too expensive for these double stacks?
I mean, the Giants one does stand out to me. I've been surprised with, now that we have so much clarity, they're getting the band back together with Daniel Jones and Barkley. Like the fact that Slayton and Hodgins and Richie James are all so cheap and we're all really good at different points in the playoffs and down the stretch last year. I am a little confused about that ADP.
I mean, Dallas, I guess. So like theoretically, Dallas looks a little bit low, but then you realize that it's Mike McCarthy and Brian Schottenheimer in charge. So it's like, sure, yeah, Dak and CD and Gallup and these guys had crazy, you know, like thermonuclear ceilings in given weeks. But it's just like, I don't know, how much are they going to be able to access that? And are they going to draft another running back and cut Zeke? What are they going to do for third wide receiver? Are they going to play Jalen Tolbert? Are they going to sign Odell Beckham? Like, what are they going to do? So at first blush, it looked a little bit low. But after actually saying all that out loud, I'm like, yeah, no, I think I get it. I think it's about right.
Yeah. It's tough too to project who that second guy is going to be. Anyways, Pete, I know you have a hard out at 2. I think Davis and I will stay on for a bit longer to talk a few more points here on the market movement. But before you leave, do you have your favorite value right now by ADP that you want to tout for this week?
We have mentioned him on the show, but I feel like I'm selecting Marvin Mims in basically every draft I'm doing right now. And he does just feel like a guy who's going to continue to jump up. Like I wouldn't be surprised to see him. You know, you think back to like last year where Alec Pierce ended up as just like a 13th, 14th round pick in almost every draft. I feel like Mims is like almost certainly headed there, if not maybe a smidge higher.
I like that one.
I got no issue with that.
I think he's going to be, I think he'll even before the draft rise 30 spots or so. So we'll see.
Well, thank you guys for having me. Great work with the show. Thank you guys, everyone, for hanging out. I'm going to dip, but these two will hold down the fort.
See you, Pete.
Later, Peter.
Anything else here you wanted to touch on from a team perspective? I guess the only other one for me, besides from teams we already talked about, I think the Rams we talked about before. That's a good one, but maybe a new one that I'll throw out here is Denver. I'm not super confident in it, but I think quarterbacks do have just bad seasons, and Russell Wilson's version of a bad season was much worse than what we've seen from Aaron Rodgers' down years in Green Bay or Tom Brady's down years on the Patriots. But I think the market does tend to overreact to these outlier down years for guys sometimes, and it's certainly I'm not going to be building my teams with 25% Russell Wilson stacks, but I think Denver is pretty fairly priced, and you can do like a mega stack of them in a pretty affordable way and just bet on Russell Wilson sort of returning to form with a coach that's not Nathaniel Hackett.
I don't hate that one because it could just be sort of similar to the Jaguars stuff this last year, just betting that Nathaniel Hackett was just like an all-time loser who's got no ability to control or understand an NFL locker room. I like that. Another one, honestly, the New England Patriots, just like having an offensive coordinator feels like it could be an edge because they didn't blow the doors off anyone on offense in 2021, but they were a lot better on offense than they were in 2022. Sounds like they're pretty much running everything back except removing Jacoby Myers, who, Jacoby Myers is sort of like, look at Jamison Crowder. Like he can volume spike. He was nice, especially weeks where he scored a touchdown. But you got to figure removing him from the offense just opens up a bunch of targets for other guys who have been really hard to keep on fantasy rosters the last couple of years. And they'll probably draft someone. Maybe they make a trade. Maybe Hunter Henry evolves into a larger role. Maybe they finally figure out how to use Jonnu. Like I think you can definitely stack Mac Jones with the running backs, with Pierre Strong, with Kevin Harris, whoever. Like it just feels like the Patriots will at least they'll be a competent team, and every team ahead of them looks non-competent. The Buccaneers will be non-competent. The Titans will be non-competent. The Colts will probably be non-competent.
I like that one a lot, actually. And the interesting thing on this chart is I think it actually undersells how cheap they are because Jacoby Myers is that red dash in the chart, and he's likely gone. So if you take him out of the equation, I think New England even jumps like Carolina and Houston as being like the absolute just most dirt cheap team in fantasy right now. So yeah, I like that quite a bit. I don't know the stat exactly, but I think in 2021, so 2 years ago, the Patriots were a top 10 scoring offense in the league. Like Mac Jones had a good rookie year.
I think they were like top 5 in DVOA on offense in 2021.
Yeah. And then you hire, two of the biggest clown show failed coaches in the league as your co-offensive coordinators, even though they've never coached offense before. And surprisingly, that didn't work. But
it was really bad.
That was horrendous. But yeah, no, I like that one quite a bit. I actually don't think I've taken any Mac Jones stacks, but you've definitely sold me on that one. Some gross, backdoor Mac Jones, Tyquan Thornton, Hunter Henry stacks, which you can get like 16th, 18th, 20th round or something right now. So
we're gonna get Bailey Zappied on this.
Yeah, that actually. I mean, I don't want to. I'm a Patriots fan, so I can talk more about that. But I think that is at least worth monitoring in the offseason, what the buzz is there, because I don't know how much the Belichick Mac Jones relationship. I don't know how strong that is right now. So I'm monitoring that, but I'm not going to draft any Zappy right now.
I think
let's move on.
Fair.
Yeah. Let's talk about the positional ADP stuff. I did want to hit on this on the show. Actually, I would recommend everyone check out this article that Hayden wrote a couple weeks ago, where he looked at the positional ADP this year versus last year, and basically highlighted that running backs are going much cheaper. Both quarterbacks and wide receivers are more expensive. So I sort of took my own stab at visualizing this here. Sort of what you want to look at is the black bar represents the current average ADP of the positional group. So for quarterbacks, for example, they're going on average at like pick 50, quarterbacks 1 through 12. In 2022, so last year when we were drafting Best Ball Mania teams in August and September, the average quarterback one was going at pick like 70 by ADP. So they've risen on average almost by like 20 spots by ADP, quarterback ones. And that's sort of been offset by running backs falling by a similar amount. Running backs 1 and running back 2, so running backs ranked 1 through 24, have dropped by about 20 spots from last year. So yeah, I just thought like I'm still thinking through how actionable this is, and like the quarterback stuff has been talked a lot about so far, but like I don't know. Part of me is wondering if just like our running backs just universally like mispriced right now, and I should be like okay with taking guys in the dead zone, because guys that are going in the dead zone now actually like in past years would be going in the second round, and those types of players have good hit rates. Like I don't know. I think there's a lot of things to think about here and what the implications are for fantasy. But yeah, curious what your thoughts are of just running backs being much cheaper and both quarterbacks and wide receivers being more expensive on Underdog right now.
I mean, yeah, you just hit it, which is that for every action, there needs to be an equal and opposite reaction. And not only are quarterbacks being pushed up, but wide receivers are being pushed up as well. Jalen Waddle, 2nd round pick. T. Higgins, 2nd round pick. Devonta Smith, Chris Olave. Like these guys are DeAndre Hopkins being picked very high for a guy who's like 32, very uncertain what team he's going to be playing for. Amari Cooper, I think a great example of a guy being drafted like very high given the context of the offense that he plays in. Christian Watson, I mean, yeah, sure. Ran like God with touchdowns. I think he's obviously very good, right? I'm not meaning, and I'm not even saying I don't get it, but the idea that, for example, Christian Watson would be, on average going ahead of DeAndre Swift or Dalvin Cook or his teammate Aaron Jones or Dameon Pierce. This is an ADP that does not make any sense. Dameon Pierce was a stone workhorse, young, crazy athletic. The offense is going to be so much better this year, right? I mean, like the Davis Mills, Jeff Driscoll nonsense. Like at the very least, you were going to have a competent, high upside quarterback in that room. I mean that is basically just the lesson. Is that these running backs are especially in half PPR. There's full PPR. If it was DraftKings scoring, I think there's actually an argument that they're actually probably just being priced appropriately. And even inside of ADP, it looks like some of the ADPs to me are bad and are exploitable. Like David Montgomery and Jamal Williams are both free agents right now. Why would Jamal Williams be going ahead of David Montgomery? Whatever team signs David Montgomery is going to sign him to be David Montgomery, whereas Jamal Williams has not earned that cachet.
There's a pretty big age gap with those guys too, I think. So yeah, that one makes no sense to me. But I thought your Watson point was really interesting because like, I think that this is like, it's sort of emblematic of how we like these simple heuristics in fantasy football, which is, draft 2nd-year wide receivers that flashed in year 1, because traditionally those guys have always outperformed hit rates. But guys like Christian Watson, who like played, only 6 or 7 games as a full-time player, would not have been going like in the early 4th round, 3, 4, 5 years ago.
There's an argument he wasn't even the best rookie wide receiver on his team. There's an argument that Romeo Doubs was actually like a more functional player who was like used in a more varied style than Watson was.
But it's like, even like I'm thinking maybe the best comp in recent years is like Ayuk, sort of a similar, like had this crazy stretch at the end of the year where he had a ton of huge like
or Debo where it's all touchdowns.
Yeah, or Debo. But those guys were going like, I think 2nd year Ayuk was going in the 7th or 8th before at the very end of the year, like surging up to the 5th, 6th. Like now these guys are starting the year like in March as a 4th round pick. Like, and I'm not saying I'm totally out on Watson. I'm not sure about that.
I'm not either. But that is a huge sea change for the last 30 years of fantasy football.
Yeah, you have to really, like I think that's something I'm going to try to hammer this offseason is like these heuristics that worked in years past, like once they're fully baked into the market prices, you can no longer, like I think another one is like draft rookie wide receivers early, like they're going to rise as the season goes on. Like I think that's no longer true. Like JSN is going at pick 50. Like I don't think he's going to rise unless he gets picked by like the Bills or Chiefs, right? Like, I don't know. These heuristics, I think we have to be very careful about in this new landscape where everyone loves wide receivers and hates running backs. Like, it's no longer the same game that we're playing, especially when a lot of these like studies that we rely on are PPR, and this game on Underdog is half PPR. So it's really interesting. Like, you have to adjust the market at some point. Like I'm not just only hammering running backs in rounds 3 through 6 as a result of this data. Like you still need to take wide receivers, obviously, but you got to be careful with some of this stuff when the landscape changes this dramatically, I think.
I mean, I would say probably the biggest point that we just hit on there is that half PPR and full PPR are a different game, the same way that the NBA, when they added the 3-point line, became a different game. Like it's actually a huge difference. Those reception points are so big and account for so much of the scoring in full PPR, and diminish so much in their value in half PPR. And also because the total number of points decreases, the value of a rushing yard increases, so like 87 rushing yards in FFPC is like, who gives a shit, but in 21 carries, 87 yards and a touchdown is a pretty good stat line in Underdog.
That's the Miles Sanders right there, right? He's,
the Miles Sanders, the Algier, that's the thesis.
Yeah. So anyways, I thought this positional stuff is interesting. I definitely want to, I think like part of it you could argue too is the type of drafter that's drafting right now is sort of like the dynasty sicko that loves wide receivers and hates running backs. Like where we also, in the grand scheme of these things, we kind of, fit into that bucket, when you consider the whole pool of fantasy players. So it'll be interesting to see if these kind of normalize as more casuals enter, or if this is truly like the new landscape we live in on Underdog. But we'll keep monitoring it. Let's wrap up here, Davis. As we try to do on every show, I want to hear what your best, what you think the best value is right now on Underdog in terms of closing line value by August and September.
Tutu Atwell. Tutu Atwell as undrafted. I mean, he finally played last year and didn't die. It's got to be a huge upset that Tutu was finally like pretty much. Let's see what was his most snaps in a game? I'm gonna guess he played at least one game of 70% snaps.
I think. Oh yeah, I think by the end he was 93%, 84%, 69, 84. He got through a month of NFL football as a full-time player and was not decleated into another universe. I think that's super bullish. So I got Tutu Atwell as a big value right now. I like that. And, Allen Robinson's, I think, completely gone. Van Jefferson, I think Jefferson's also a fine pick if you want to take him. Sure, he's really cheap as well. But someone on the Rams is going to step up, and we know the Rams don't have a ton of cap space or anything to acquire guys. So I'm trying to pull up Atwell now to see. I think, like, if I remember correctly, he was kind of spiking on some of like my usage stuff by the end of the year.
Because they were giving him rushes too.
Yeah, he had 20% targets per route run, which is pretty solid. 1.7 yards per route run. Again, like solid. Like he didn't face plant in his opportunity. It wasn't like special, but it certainly was solid enough that I think at a completely free cost, he is worth a bet there. For me, I think I'm going to go with something we talked about earlier, Will Levis. And it's, I'm not going to remake the Justin Herbert, Zach Wilson, Daniel Jones argument that I've heard you and Pat talk about a bunch, but it's just when the quarterback with the high draft capital that everyone, agrees that they suck. Well, maybe they don't. And especially if they're completely free, I'm fine taking stabs. I think Levis gets drafted into a spot where he's going to project to start day one. I think his most likely landing spots will be like the Colts, Raiders, teams like that. Maybe
feels
like
the Colts is kind of his destiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
If Derek Carr, I mean, I was very certain Carr was going to go to the Colts. So now if Carr's not going to do it, feels like Levis is the next of the Carson Wentz evolution. He's like the base form.
Yeah. I think we'll find out soon who they're taking. Irsay is definitely gonna let it slip in a press conference or something. Who they like. He almost did last time he talked. So
yeah, he's definitely just gonna tweet it out.
Yeah, like his roof is open tweets. It'll just be Will Levis is the pick at 4. Yeah. Okay. Let's close things down. Quick housekeeping stuff. I will be out next week, but the show will continue on. Davis and Pat, I believe, will both be holding it down, potentially with Pete, potentially with someone else. We will see. But we'll still have all the same charts and everything for you next week. That part of the show will not go away. But yeah, excited to see what news breaks in the next week. I think we'll have some more free agency news and cuts and trades and stuff to discuss. But yeah, anything else for you, Davis, before we shut things down?
Nope, that's all. Everyone, thank you for listening. Pat and I will be back next week, and we will continue to grind.
Sounds good. All right, thanks everyone for joining us today. We will see you next week.